Well, welcome to BareLead, where we strip down leadership to its raw, unfiltered, unabashed truths. I'm Pooja, and if you're tuning in for the first time, we're going to be diving into bold decisions, vulnerability, and what modern leadership looks like for women today. The topic we're going to be conversing about is courage and brave decisions, and my guest today is Ebere, and I'm super excited for you to hear more about her leadership journey. So thank you so much for being here today. It's great that we can have this conversation after quite a long time, but please help me understand a little bit about yourself and also for our listeners, if you could.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you for having me. Like you said, my name is Ebere Kadiri. I am the founder of Rise and Lead Women, based here in the Netherlands, but operates within Europe. And Rise and Lead Women supports women's leadership advancement, and also support corporate organizations in building their leadership pipeline.
Okay, lovely. It's great to have you. And could you share a little bit about your background, a little bit about how you arrived at leadership in your field, and also now building a platform for leaders?
So my journey actually started from back home in Nigeria before I arrived in Netherlands. I owned a restaurant, and in that restaurant, it grew quickly. I was forced into leadership, which means I had to build several branches, hired so many managers and employees. And that is exactly when I realized that as an entrepreneur, you also needed to learn how to lead.
Mm,
Whereas when your business is expanding very quickly, you need leadership. And
yeah.
so I came across an entrepreneurial leadership program in the United States. For 10 months, I had to learn because when I had one branch, everything was fine.
Yeah.
Then I had two branches, and then I had seven outlets. So we were busy every day, and it was becoming very complex. I didn't know how to deal with it. And then I had a vision to build five more branches within 3 years. So I had to look for help.
Yeah.
So it was at that point that I realized the importance of leadership, especially when you own a business or when you're leading a unit in a company. And that was where my journey of leadership started.
Mhm.
So I became so interested in reading books around leadership, listening to John Maxwell, started listening to people who talk about leadership a lot. And eventually, when I moved to the Netherlands, I really wanted to go back to school, get my master's degree. So I chose leadership. I went to Webster University to get my degree in leadership and management. And it was at that point I think it was during my term paper. I was asking the question, where are there few women in leadership positions?
Mm,
And that question helped me to I started researching, interviewing senior women, finding out what helped them to get to where they are today.
yeah.
And it was really from gathering that information, combining theory and practice, that I created the Rise and Lead Women's platform.
Mm,
Created as a leadership organization, not necessarily as a women's organization. It was created to support women to prepare us for leadership and also to position us for leadership. And
mm.
so Rise and Lead today has really expanded into providing leadership development for women, attracting partners from several companies, including Fortune 500 companies like Amazon, Philips, UPS,
Mhm.
and so many others, and helping to build their leadership pipeline so we can have more women in leadership positions.
Yeah. Lovely. I think it's theory and practice, everything combined that kind of gave birth to Rise and Lead. I'm really happy, and I think the work you're doing is much needed because I've also been in the corporate for many, many years now. And of course, you see like a progressive thinning of representation as you go up the hierarchy, and in specific industries, you just don't see women on company pages. So it's brilliant what you're doing. And I think you mentioned several parts, right? Like from restaurant expansion to moving to a different country to then going back to education and then of course launching something as big as you have. Of course, courage has played a part in your leadership journey. And can you maybe tell me a little bit about the most brave decision you have made as a leader?
Oh, When we talk about brave decisions, I always say, I don't see myself as a very brave person, but I see myself as somebody who who take risk, like calculated risk. Anytime if I believe in something, if something has to do with my vision, my values, I go for it. And so when I think about brave decisions, let me think about one. I would say is actually launching Rise and Lead in the Netherlands.
Mm.
The reason I say is a brave decision is that, when I came to the Netherlands in 2013, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have the network. I couldn't speak the language, right? But within me, I knew there was this calling to do something that would impact women,
Mm.
especially, right? I knew it within me, so I had it as a vision, but I didn't know where to start from. I was a bit, I don't know whether to call it, I was a bit fearful.
Mm.
I didn't know what happened, but I was hesitating on taking that action. But I remember reflections and pattern recognition is very important. I remember one time I was thinking about the fact that in my 20s I launched my first business. In my early 30s I built a restaurant that was employing 56 people back in Nigeria. And it wasn't an easy journey, but I did it.
Mm.
So when I remember that pattern and that journey, I had to mentor myself. I had to encourage myself. And I said to me, Ebere, you can do this because you've done it before.
Yeah.
So going out there to launch even the first business, also to launch Rise and Lead was actually a brave decision because I didn't know whether people would accept me or not. I didn't know whether people will buy into it. And in 2018, not many people were talking about women's leadership.
Mm.
That was my mission to increase the number of women in leadership positions. And so for me, that was brave. And also reaching out to people I didn't know, reaching out to companies I didn't know them. I had nobody to introduce me to somebody. So I had to find a way to reach out to all those senior leaders you see in Rise and Lead to bring them to
Mm.
buy into my vision and support that vision. So for me, that was a brave decision. And
Yeah.
I also believe it was linked to a bigger purpose. Maybe that's why I was committed to see it through. Yeah.
I think the way you speak about it is it's like it wasn't that big a deal, but I think practically, if you go about it, it is a very big deal. So that, it was absolutely very brave of you to start off because I think when you don't speak the language, when you're a little bit ahead of the curve because nobody's talking about women in leadership, I think it's an uphill battle because first you have to educate and then you have to kind of get their agenda time and then you have to push in your agenda, and then of course getting people along and making it a mission. I mean, I think you like you said, it makes you fearful, but once you look back in hindsight, you also look at the proof that you've generated, right? Because you've done the restaurants and the number of people you employed. So I think sometimes women also forget how amazing they have been, and what you did was amazing because you look back at your proof and then you said, okay, I can do it. And I think that's quite a lesson in bravery and courage in itself.
I agree with you on that.
Great.
Right.
Yeah. So apart from, for example, having that barrier in terms of language and also barrier in terms of not knowing people you were reaching out to, what other fear has challenged you the most in your journey, and how did you move through that?
What fear has challenged me the most?
Yeah.
Um, I think when I think about fear that has challenged me the most, I would say, actually presently, I think I would say presently, right? Because I don't know if I should say this. I've never shared this with anyone, but maybe I should just say this. Somehow I don't usually give in to fear because I believe in faith. And maybe this has to do with my spirituality as a Christian. I believe in faith in God, and faith that if I have received it as a mission or a vision to achieve something, then I put my faith in God to achieve it. But of course, there are other secret fears that go. that will go through my mind, and then I will think, what kind of decision am I going to take about this fear? So, but the major one I think I would say is I always think, what will happen if I step down from Rise and Lead Women?
Mm,
Yes, because Rise and Lead, I had a 5-year vision
mm,
to build it, complete it, and step down and let other people run it.
mm.
That's what entrepreneurship is about.
Yeah.
But now it's been 8 years. And I remember the first time, I think I believe 3 or 2 years ago, I mentioned it to my team that, listen, we need to start preparing. I need to at what point step down because I am an entrepreneur. I have to build other things.
Mm,
I remember one of my team members by name Geralda, she said, Ebere, don't even think about it. Don't think about it. Your rise and lead. Rise and lead is you. Everybody knows you. You are the one who brings all these big partners. It's you. Everything is you. And I was beginning to believe what she said. And then I was afraid. I said, okay, am I going to be stuck here? What if I choose to step down?
mm,
What will happen to Rise and Lead Women? What will happen to all the women who look up to us for their advancements, who get inspiration, who get mentors within Rise and Lead, who have gotten sponsors, who gotten jobs through Rise and Lead? What will happen?
yeah.
And it was really a scary moment for me. And then again, pattern recognition comes in again. Then I remembered I built a restaurant. And when I had one branch, it was easy to manage. When I had two branches it, and 7 sales outlets and a bakery, it became complex to manage. And
Mm,
somehow I needed to run that business and I didn't need to be a bottleneck in that business. So I learned something that systems run a business and people run the system. I learned it from an entrepreneurial book, E-Myth,
mhm,
Revisited. And then I think I hired a coach, an entrepreneurial leadership coach in the US for 10 months just to prepare me to learn how to build a company that runs without me. And after 10 months, I realized I needed help with the execution.
mm,
So I hired one of the best coaches or consultants in the food industry in Nigeria. He worked with us for 6 months to make sure we implemented those systems.
mm,
Once those systems were implemented, I had my time back, I had my life back. The business was running even when I was away for 5 months, it was still running. And so I decided it's time to start putting those systems in Rise and Lead.
yeah.
Now, okay, the summit has those systems. Since 2019, we've had systems to run the summit, which is why people get the same experience of impact
Mm,
every year when they come. But the organization didn't have the systems. So last year, I took out 3 months just to work on those systems. And this year, I've been working with my team to implement them, document everything. And I've been staying behind the scenes, even though people don't recognize that I don't spend that much time as I used to again in Rise and Lead. And it's still running.
mm,
So even if I'm not there tomorrow, the structures are there, the system, the processes, the SOPs, everything is there. And we're attracting the right team. We have very good team who are even moving forward. So that's how I solved the fear. That was a major fear for me, and that's how I solved it. And the reason I had to solve that fear is because of my values for people. I was thinking about the people who benefit from Rise and Lead. What happens if he's no longer there? What happens if I'm no longer
yeah.
there? Stuff like that. So that pushed me because of my commitment to ensure that Rise and Lead is sustainable
Mm,
beyond me. So that really pushed me to make sure that those systems are now in place. Yeah.
that's I mean, that's beautiful. I think the fact that you built a mechanism for Rise and Lead to kind of sustain in your absence, it's amazing. And I think that's where a lot of women particularly falter because when we start off, we like to kind of keep it hourly basis. We commit a lot of bandwidth. Our calendar looks extremely full. And yet, we are still the bottleneck in the business. That's the reason we can't scale.
Yeah.
So I love that you mentioned that you consciously put in systems for people to run the show, to have the SOPs in place to make sure the experience is consistent and you get your time back, which is primarily what entrepreneurship should do if it's
Yeah,
successful.
and I like what you said. Most times founders become the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Because I've had that experience in the restaurant, I didn't want that to happen again. I didn't want to become a bottleneck in any business or organization I'm building.
So, Ebere, I also want to kind of, wrap the section up by asking you, what does courage look like for women in leadership today? And what advice would you give to people stepping into leadership roles? Because one part is entrepreneurship, the other part is also underrepresented women leaders in the corporate or the Fortune 500 that you may have worked with. What advice would you give to them? Because courage also has consequences, and it's
Yeah.
difficult to carry your ground.
Yeah, you're right. And of course, this is what one of the things we do in Rise and Lead Women. We encourage women. In the past, it has always been the conversation has focused heavily on confidence, speak up more, be more visible, take seat at the table. And these things still matter, I must tell you. Some people still need to hear all of this. But
Mm.
what I'm seeing now, especially among senior executives and even um, professionals generally, is a more sophisticated form of courage. What do I mean by that? Because so many women are already capable. Some of the things we need to preach that women are not capable, no, women are capable. Women
Yeah,
are delivering.
yeah,
The question is no longer whether women can do the work, but the problem is the system. The system is biased against women.
yeah,
Now, how do women, despite the system that is against us, still scale through obstacles and rise and lead?
mm,
Now, how do we do that? It's positioning and preparation. So, first is preparation. When you prepare yourself for a higher role, for example, or maybe even start with aspirations. And this is what we cover in our program called Rise to Leadership program. It starts with your vision or your values, knowing your value, what you bring to the table,
mm,
being clear about it, right? And then have a vision of growth where
yeah,
you want to be, and then being able to show up visibly, positioning yourself in front of decision makers, in front of stakeholders, people who will recognize you, trust you, and be able to sponsor you.
yeah,
So it's more about preparing yourself, showing up with credibility and also with strategic visibility, which means being in front of the right people at the right time, not just being everywhere.
yeah,
And so this is what we are seeing, like women positioning themselves before the right stakeholders, understanding your value clearly, building credible visibility, which means you have something to offer,
mm,
and also preparing for the next step before you're even ready or before the title arrives. As women, my advice is do not wait until you feel completely ready to be seen at the next level.
yeah,
Secret is relationships because it's still people that will decide whether you move up or not. It
yeah,
doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't
100%.
it doesn't matter how hard you work, yeah. So don't wait for permission.
Yeah,
Give yourself the permission to dream big, to aspire, to prepare yourself, and to position yourself in front of those who matter for your advancement. Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. I think you've kind of summed up a lot of leadership lessons in that last answer because being self-aware, knowing your value systems, ensuring that you know what value you add to the ecosystem, and then, of course, understanding influence mechanics in the organization, who influences decisions, what are the meetings that actually have strategic impact, and positioning yourself right and having the language for it. I think that's kind of every woman's dream, right? To have that and to position themselves forward and make a mark even before they're ready. Because I feel like we just wait and collect proof and certifications one after the other, as opposed to just building that relationship and positioning what we already have to make a mark. And I think we can do a really good job if we just learn that. So thank you. And I think a lot of women will want to aspire to be a part of Rise and Lead this year. And thank you for sharing.
So you're welcome. Everyone is welcome to join us in September. I think it's on the 10th and 11th in The Hague for the Rise and Lead Summit. Or they should visit our website to already see some of the programs we run every month. So thank you for being me. And it's good to remember, the popular saying that says, courage is not the absence of fear. I always like to remind myself that, but
Yeah,
that courage is the willingness to act despite
the
fear.
fear. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. So that's
Closing thought.
my
Mic drop
closing
moment.
time for everyone. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for being a
You're
part of
welcome.
this. And thank you to the listeners for tuning into BareLead. If you love this conversation, you can follow, subscribe, or leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Music. I'm Pooja, and I'll see you next time for more raw and stripped down leadership truths. And until then, keep it real.